The black Mercedes S-Class rolled smoothly through the evening traffic of London. Behind the wheel sat a man in a plain driver's uniform, his cap pulled low. His hands gripped the steering wheel firmly as he watched his wife through the rearview mirror. She didn't know who he really was, and what he was about to discover would shatter everything he thought he knew about their marriage. Before we continue with this story, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest incredible stories. Also, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this powerful message. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's continue. 5 months earlier, everything had seemed perfect. Daniel Phelps stood on the balcony of his penthouse in Oxford, overlooking the London skyline. At 38 years old, he was the CEO of Phelps Industries, one of the United Kingdom's largest tech companies. His net worth was estimated at over 3 billion naira. But despite all his wealth, Daniel felt empty. His phone buzzed. It was his younger sister Chioma, calling for the 3rd time that day. "Daniel, you need to settle down," she said the moment he answered. "You're almost 40. What are you waiting for?" "I'm busy building my empire, Chioma." "Your empire means nothing if you have no one to share it with," she replied. "Mama is worried. Even Papa mentioned it last Sunday." Daniel sighed. His parents had been pressuring him about marriage for years, but after watching several friends go through expensive divorces, he had become cautious. Too many women were interested in his money, not in him. "I'll find someone when the time is right," he said. "The time will never feel right," Chioma countered. "You're too careful, too suspicious. Not every woman is a gold digger." After the call ended, Daniel stood on the balcony for a long time, thinking. Maybe Chioma was right. Maybe his wealth had made him too paranoid to recognize genuine love. The next morning, Daniel's best friend and business partner, Emeka, stopped by his office. "You look terrible," Emeka said, dropping into a chair. "Still thinking about what Chioma said?" "How did you know?" "Because she called me too," Emeka laughed. "Your sister is persistent." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Emeka, how do I know if a woman loves me for who I am and not for what I have?" Emeka was quiet for a moment. "You don't. Not until you test them." "Test them how?" "By showing them who you are without the money," Emeka suggested. "Strip away the wealth, the cars, the penthouses. See if they still want you." The idea planted itself in Daniel's mind. Over the next few days, it grew into a plan. 2 weeks later, Daniel attended a charity event for orphan children in Surulere. He had sponsored the event through his company but came dressed simply to avoid attention. That's where he met her. Grace Adeyemi stood near the children's play area, laughing as she helped a little boy tie his shoelaces. She wore a simple yellow dress, her natural hair pulled back in a ponytail. There was something genuine about her smile, something that made Daniel want to know more. He approached slowly. "You're good with children." She looked up, surprised. "Thank you. I volunteer here every Saturday. These kids deserve all the love they can get." "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. "Grace," she replied, shaking it warmly. They talked for over an hour. Daniel learned that Grace worked as a nurse at a government hospital in Yaba. She lived in a small flat in Ebute Metta with her younger brother, who she was putting through university. Her parents had passed away 5 years ago. "What do you do?" Grace asked. Daniel had prepared for this question. "I'm a driver for a private company." Grace's smile didn't change. "That's honest work. My father was a bus driver. He was the hardest working man I ever knew." Something in Daniel's chest tightened. She didn't look down on him. She didn't dismiss him. She treated him like an equal. Over the next 3 months, Daniel and Grace grew closer. He picked her up after her nursing shifts in an old Toyota Corolla he had bought specifically for this purpose. They ate at local bukas, walked along Bar Beach, and talked for hours about everything. Grace introduced him to her younger brother, Tunde, a computer science student at the University of London. The young man was bright, ambitious, and respectful. "Your brother is impressive," Daniel told Grace one evening as they sat eating suya by the roadside. "He's all I have left," Grace said quietly. "After our parents died, I promised myself I would see him graduate, even if it means I work double shifts." "You work too hard," Daniel observed. Hard work never killed anyone, she smiled. Besides, I'm happy. I have my health, my brother, and now I have you. Daniel felt a wave of guilt. He was lying to her every day. But he needed to be sure. He needed to know her heart was pure. 3 months became 6 months. Daniel was falling in love. Grace was everything he had hoped to find. Kind, hardworking, genuine, and humble. She never asked him for money. When he offered to help with Tunde's school fees, she politely refused. "We manage on our own," she said firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but we're fine." Daniel respected her even more for that. Finally, after 8 months of dating, Daniel decided it was time. He would propose to Grace and then reveal his true identity. He was confident now. Grace loved him for who he was, not what he had. The proposal was simple. No fancy restaurant, no elaborate setup, just the two of them on Bar Beach at sunset. "Grace," Daniel said, kneeling in the sand, "you've made me happier than I've been in years. Will you marry me?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. Yes, yes, of course. The ring was modest, all a driver could supposedly afford, but Grace wore it like it was made of diamonds. 2 weeks later, Daniel took Grace to meet his family. This would be the moment of truth. He would introduce her to his parents and then explain everything. His parents lived in a massive mansion in Victoria Island. As they approached the gate, Grace stared in confusion. "Daniel, where are we?" "My parents' house," he said, watching her carefully. The gates opened. Grace saw the compound, the fountain, the luxury cars parked outside. Her mouth fell open. "Daniel, what is this?" He parked and turned to her. "Grace, I need to tell you something. I'm not just a driver. I own Phelps Industries. I'm the CEO. Grace stared at him, speechless. "I lied about my job," Daniel continued quickly. "I wanted to know if you could love me without the money. And you did. You loved me when you thought I had nothing. That's why I know you're the right woman for me." Grace's expression was unreadable. "You lied to me for 8 months? I had to know your heart was pure. By deceiving me?" Her voice shook. "By making me believe you were struggling when you have all this. Grace, please understand. I need a moment," she said, getting out of the car. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Phelps, came out of the house. She embraced Grace warmly. "Welcome, my daughter. Daniel has told us so much about you." The family dinner was awkward. Grace was polite but distant. Daniel's parents loved her immediately, but she barely spoke. On the drive home, Grace finally broke her silence. "I feel like I don't know you anymore," she said quietly. "You do know me," Daniel insisted. "The man you fell in love with is still the same man." "Is he?" Grace asked. "Because the man I fell in love with was honest." "Grace, I'm sorry, but you have to understand my position. Women have pursued me for years because of my money. I needed to know you were different. And I needed to know I could trust you," Grace replied. "But you built our entire relationship on a lie." They didn't speak the rest of the way. Despite the rocky revelation, Grace agreed to continue the relationship. Daniel showered her with gifts: a new apartment in Lekki, a car, designer clothes, jewelry. He wanted to make up for the deception. But something had changed between them. Grace accepted the gifts, but seemed uncomfortable. The easy laughter they once shared became rare. "She'll adjust," Emeka assured him. "It's a lot to take in." 3 months after the revelation, Daniel proposed again, this time with a proper ring, a massive diamond that cost more than most people earned in 5 years. Grace said yes, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. The wedding planning began immediately. It would be the social event of the season. Daniel spared no expense. The best venue, the best caterers, the best of everything. Grace went along with it all, but Daniel noticed she seemed overwhelmed. Whenever he asked if she was happy, she assured him she was. They married on a beautiful Saturday in December. The ceremony was held at the Eco Hotel, with over 500 guests in attendance. Grace looked stunning in her custom-made wedding gown. As Daniel watched her walk down the aisle, he felt a surge of triumph. He had found genuine love. He had outsmarted all the gold diggers and found a woman who loved him for himself. After the honeymoon in Dubai, they settled into married life. Daniel bought them a mansion in Banana Island. Grace quit her nursing job, though Daniel noticed she seemed sad about it. "You don't have to work anymore," he told her. "You can relax, enjoy life." "I liked my work," Grace said quietly. "I liked helping people." "You can do charity work," Daniel suggested. "We can set up a foundation in your name." Grace nodded but said nothing more. The months passed. From the outside, they looked like the perfect couple. But Daniel began to notice small things. Grace spent a lot of time on her phone. She took calls in private. Sometimes he heard her crying in the bathroom. "Is everything okay?" he asked one evening. "Everything's fine," she replied with a forced smile. Daniel wanted to believe her, but doubt crept into his mind. What if he had been wrong about her? What if she was hiding something? Then came the day that changed everything. Daniel's regular driver, James, called in sick. Instead of using another driver from his company, Daniel had an idea. "I'll drive myself today," he told his secretary, but he wouldn't drive in his usual car. He would use one of the company's regular vehicles, and he would pick up Grace, who had a lunch appointment in Victoria Island. He wanted to surprise her, maybe take her out for lunch themselves, reconnect the way they used to. Daniel put on a simple driver's uniform and cap. He drove to their mansion and called Grace. "Madam, your driver is here," he said, disguising his voice slightly. "Thank you, I'm coming down," Grace replied. Daniel watched through the rearview mirror as his wife walked out of their home. She looked beautiful in a blue dress, but there was something in her expression. Nervousness, maybe even fear. She got into the back seat without looking at him closely. "Victoria Island, please," she said. "Eco Hotel." As Daniel drove, he watched his wife in the mirror. She was texting furiously on her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then her phone rang. "Hello?" Grace answered. "Yes, I'm on my way now." "No, he doesn't know. He thinks I'm meeting Chioma for lunch." Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Grace continued. I know. I feel terrible about lying. But what choice do I have? This is the only time I can get away." "Yes, I have it with me. Everything we discussed. I'll see you soon." She ended the call and stared out the window, her expression troubled. Daniel's mind raced. His wife was lying to him. She was meeting someone secretly, someone she didn't want him to know about. All his old suspicions came flooding back. Had he been wrong about Grace all along? Was she like all the others, just better at hiding it? When they arrived at the Echo Hotel, Grace got out quickly. "Wait here," she told him. "I'll call when I'm ready to leave." Daniel watched her disappear into the hotel. His heart pounded. Every instinct told him to follow her, to find out what she was hiding. He parked the car and went after her, keeping his cap pulled low and staying at a distance. Grace walked through the lobby and took the elevator to the 10th floor. Daniel followed, taking the stairs to avoid being seen in the elevator with her. On the 10th floor, he watched from around a corner as Grace knocked on a hotel room door. A man opened it. He was young, well-dressed, handsome. He smiled when he saw Grace and pulled her into the room quickly. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. His wife, his Grace, the woman who was supposed to love him genuinely. She was meeting another man in a hotel room. All of it had been a lie. He stumbled back to the stairwell, his vision blurring. The pain in his chest was physical. He had given her everything. He had trusted her completely, and she had betrayed him. For 15 minutes, Daniel sat on the stairwell steps, trying to breathe, trying to think. Should he burst into the room and confront them? Should he leave and call his lawyer immediately? Finally, he stood up. He needed to know the truth, all of it. Daniel walked to the hotel room door and knocked firmly. Footsteps approached. The door opened. The young man stood there, confused. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for my wife," Daniel said, his voice cold. The man's eyes widened. "Your wife?" Daniel pushed past him into the room. Grace sat on the couch, papers spread out in front of her. When she saw Daniel, her face went white. "Daniel," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" "That's my question," he replied. "Who is this man? What's going on?" Grace stood up slowly, her eyes filling with tears. "Daniel, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," he said bitterly. 8 months you played me, made me believe you were different, and now this. It's not what you think, she said desperately. Then what is it? Daniel's voice rose. Why are you meeting another man in a hotel room? Why are you lying about having lunch with my sister? The young man stepped forward. Sir, I think you're misunderstanding. Stay out of this, Daniel snapped. Grace moved toward him, her hands outstretched. Daniel, please, just listen to me. I've listened enough, Daniel said. I've heard enough lies. He turned to leave. Behind him, he heard Grace crying, calling his name, but he kept walking. Down the hallway, down the stairs, out of the hotel. His mind was numb as he drove away. The woman he loved, the woman he had tested so carefully, had turned out to be exactly what he feared. A liar, a cheater, someone who saw him as nothing more than a wallet. Daniel drove aimlessly through London traffic, barely seeing the road ahead. His phone rang repeatedly. Grace, Chioma, his mother. He ignored them all. Finally, he pulled over near the London lagoon. He sat in the parked car, staring at the water, feeling his carefully constructed world falling apart. He had been so careful, so thorough in his testing. How had he missed this? How had Grace fooled him so completely? His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Please come home. Please let me explain. Nothing happened. I swear to you, nothing happened. Daniel stared at the message. Part of him wanted to believe her, but the evidence was clear. She had lied. She had met another man. What other explanation could there be? Another text came through, this time from the unknown number. Mr. Phelps, this is David from the hotel. Grace asked me to contact you. Please, sir, you have the wrong idea. Grace was helping me with something important. Please call her. Let her explain. Daniel deleted both messages without responding. As the sun set over London, Daniel sat alone in his car, a billionaire with everything and nothing. His disguise had revealed a truth he wished he'd never learned. His wife, the woman he trusted above all others, had broken his heart. Daniel didn't go home that night. Instead, he checked into a hotel under a false name, turned off his phone, and sat in the darkness, replaying everything in his mind. The meeting, the secret call, the young man, the hotel room. All of it pointed to one conclusion. Grace had been using him all along. By morning, his phone had 43 missed calls and 67 text messages. He scrolled through them without reading. Grace, Chioma, his parents, Emeka, even Tunde, Grace's brother. One message from Emeka caught his attention. Daniel, wherever you are, call me. Grace is at the house crying. Your mother is here. Something's wrong with the story. Call me. Something wrong with the story? What story could there be except betrayal? Daniel finally turned on his phone and called his lawyer. Kunle, I need you to start divorce proceedings immediately. Daniel, what happened? Kunle asked, surprised. You just got married 6 months ago. My wife is cheating on me. I saw her with another man in a hotel room. There was a pause. Did you actually see them doing anything? I saw enough, Daniel said coldly. She lied about where she was going. She met him secretly. What more do I need to see? Daniel, maybe you should talk to her first. Just start the paperwork, Daniel interrupted. I want this marriage ended as quickly as possible. After hanging up, Daniel finally drove home. It was mid-morning when he arrived at the Banana Island mansion. 3 cars were parked in front. His mother's Range Rover, Chioma's Mercedes, and Emeka's BMW. Daniel took a deep breath and walked inside. The living room fell silent when he entered. His mother sat on the sofa next to Grace, who looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red and swollen. Chioma stood by the window, arms crossed. Emeka paced near the door. Daniel, his mother stood immediately. Where have you been? We've been worried sick. I needed time to think, he replied, not looking at Grace. Grace stood up slowly. Daniel, please. Please let me explain what you saw. What's there to explain? Daniel's voice was flat. I saw you with another man in a hotel room. You lied about where you were going. Because I knew you wouldn't understand, Grace said desperately. I knew if I told you the truth, you would react exactly like this. The truth? Daniel laughed bitterly. You want to talk about truth? After everything I did to make sure you were genuine. Chioma stepped forward. Brother, you need to listen to her. Stay out of this, Chioma. No, Chioma said firmly, because you're being an idiot. Grace has been trying to explain since yesterday, but you won't listen. Mrs. Phelps touched Grace's shoulder gently. Tell him, my daughter. Tell him everything. Grace wiped her tears and looked directly at Daniel. The man you saw at the hotel is David Adeleke. He's a doctor, a kidney specialist. Daniel frowned, confused. What does that have to do with anything? Everything, Grace said, her voice breaking. Daniel, my brother Tunde is sick. He has been sick for months. He needs a kidney transplant. The room seemed to tilt. Daniel grabbed the back of a chair for support. What? Grace continued, tears streaming down her face. We found out 3 months after we got married. Tunde started feeling tired all the time. At first, we thought it was just stress from school, but it got worse. He started losing weight, having trouble breathing. Why didn't you tell me? Daniel asked, his voice weak. Because I knew what you would do, Grace said. You would throw money at the problem. You would pay for everything immediately, and I couldn't let you do that. Why not? Daniel was genuinely confused. Because it would prove you right, Grace said quietly. It would prove that I married you for your money, that I was just another woman after your wealth. Emeka spoke up. Daniel, sit down. Let her finish. Daniel sat slowly, his mind reeling. Grace took a shaky breath. When we found out about Tunde's condition, the doctor said he needed a transplant as soon as possible. The cost is enormous. Over 15 million naira for the surgery and post-operative care. I could have paid that easily, Daniel said. I know, Grace replied. But don't you see? If I had come to you asking for 15 million naira for my brother just months after we got married, what would you have thought? What would everyone have thought? Daniel was silent. You already doubted me once, Grace continued. You lied to me for 8 months because you thought I might be after your money. How could I come to you so soon asking for such a huge amount? You would have thought your worst fears were confirmed. Mrs. Phelps wiped her own eyes. So what did you do, my daughter? I started working again, Grace said. In secret. I got a job at a private hospital, working night shifts while you slept. I saved every naira, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough in time. The hotel meeting, Daniel said slowly, beginning to understand. Grace nodded. Dr. David Adeleke is one of the country's best kidney specialists. He also runs a foundation that helps patients who can't afford transplants. I've been meeting with him for weeks, filling out applications, providing documentation. Yesterday was the final meeting. He wanted to review everything before presenting Tunde's case to the foundation board. The papers on the couch, Daniel whispered. Medical records, Grace confirmed. Financial statements, everything needed for the application. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Grace, I saw you with another man and assumed the worst. I didn't even let you explain. You've been trained to see betrayal everywhere, Chioma said quietly. Your wealth has made you suspicious of everyone, even the woman you love. How long has Tunde been sick? Daniel asked. 5 months, Grace said. He made me promise not to tell you. He was afraid you would think we trapped you into marriage to pay for his treatment. Where is he now? At the teaching hospital in Yaba, Grace replied. On dialysis. His condition is stable, but he needs the transplant soon. Daniel stood up abruptly. We're going to see him, now. Daniel, Grace started. Now, he repeated firmly. And then we're getting him the best treatment available. I don't care what it costs. But people will think. I don't care what people think, Daniel said, looking at his wife properly for the first time since entering the room. I care about you. I care about your brother. And I was a fool for not trusting you. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Grace sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at Daniel. He kept his eyes on the road, his jaw tight. I'm sorry, she said softly. I should have told you from the beginning. No, Daniel replied. I should have created a marriage where you felt safe enough to tell me anything. Instead, I made you feel like you had to hide. At the hospital, they found Tunde in a shared ward, hooked up to a dialysis machine. The young man looked thin and tired. When he saw them enter, his face filled with panic. Grace, what is he doing here? Tunde tried to sit up. You promised you wouldn't tell him. He found out, Grace said gently. Tunde looked at Daniel with fear in his eyes. Sir, please. This isn't what it looks like. Grace didn't marry you for money. She loved you before she even knew you had money. I know, Daniel said, pulling a chair close to the bed. And I'm sorry I ever made either of you feel like you couldn't come to me for help. We didn't want to be a burden, Tunde said weakly. You're my brother now, Daniel replied. Family is never a burden. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Dr. Ogunlade, this is Daniel Phelps. I need you to prepare a private suite at your hospital immediately. I'm transferring a patient to you today. Kidney failure. Needs transplant. Yes, I'll cover all costs. Money is not an issue. Thank you. Tunde's eyes widened. Sir, I can't let you. You don't have a choice, Daniel said firmly but kindly. Grace is my wife. You're my family. This discussion is over. Grace covered her mouth, fresh tears flowing. Within hours, Tunde was transferred to a private hospital in Victoria Island. A team of specialists examined him. Dr. Ogunlade, one of London's top nephrologists, came to speak with them personally. The good news is that Tunde is a good candidate for transplant, Dr. Ogunlade explained. The challenge is finding a suitable donor. We'll start the matching process immediately. If we can't find a match through the donor registry, we may need to test family members. Test me, Grace said immediately. And me, Daniel added. Over the next week, Daniel watched his wife transform back into the woman he had fallen in love with. With Tunde receiving proper care, some of the weight lifted from her shoulders. She smiled more. She laughed again. But Daniel still felt the guilt of his suspicions eating at him. One evening, as they sat in Tunde's hospital room watching him sleep, Grace spoke quietly. I understand why you doubted me, you know. Daniel turned to her. That doesn't make it right. No, Grace agreed. But I understand. You've been hurt before. People have used you. It makes sense that you'd be careful. But I tested you already, Daniel said. For 8 months, I pretended to be a driver. You loved me anyway. You proved yourself. Why couldn't I just trust that? Grace was quiet for a moment. Maybe because trust isn't something you prove once and then it's done. It's something you build every day. I failed at building it, Daniel said. I made you afraid to come to me when you needed help. We both made mistakes, Grace replied. I should have trusted you enough to tell you about Tunde, even if I was scared of what you'd think. Daniel took her hand. No more secrets. Whatever happens, we face it together. No more secrets, Grace agreed. The test results came back 3 days later. Dr. Ogunlade called them into his office with a smile. We found a match, he announced. And it's actually perfect. Close family usually has the best chance, and this is exceptional. Who? Grace asked eagerly. You, Mrs. Phelps. You're a perfect match for your brother. Grace's face lit up, then immediately clouded with concern. Is it safe? For me to donate? Completely safe, Dr. Ogunlade assured her. You're healthy, young, and strong. People live perfectly normal lives with one kidney. But I want you to understand this is your choice. No pressure. I'll do it, Grace said without hesitation. When can we schedule the surgery? The operation was scheduled for 2 weeks later. During that time, Daniel saw yet another side of his wife. Despite her own nervousness about the surgery, she focused entirely on comforting Tunde. What if something goes wrong? Tunde asked her one evening. Nothing will go wrong, Grace assured him. We have the best doctors, the best hospital, and even if something did happen, I'd do this 100 times over for you. You're my brother. You're all I have left of our parents. You have Daniel now, Tunde pointed out. Grace smiled. I do, and he's wonderful. But you're my blood. You're my responsibility. I promised Mama before she died that I'd take care of you. Watching them, Daniel felt his heart swell with love and admiration. This was the woman he had married, not someone after his money, but someone who would literally give a part of herself to save her brother. The night before the surgery, Daniel and Grace sat alone in their living room. Are you scared? He asked. Terrified, she admitted, but also hopeful. Tunde will have a real chance at life again. He can finish school, have a career, maybe have a family someday. Daniel pulled her close. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong, Grace whispered. I feel like I've been drowning for months, trying to figure out how to save him. You don't have to drown anymore, Daniel said. I'm here. I'll always be here. Grace looked up at him. Even when I make mistakes, even when I hide things from you, even then, Daniel promised. But maybe try not to hide things anymore. She laughed softly. Deal. Grace, Daniel said seriously, I need to tell you something. I called my lawyer the day I saw you at the hotel. I asked him to start divorce proceedings. Grace's smile faded. Oh. I stopped him as soon as I learned the truth, Daniel continued quickly. But I need you to know how close I came to destroying everything. My suspicions, my lack of trust. It almost cost me the best thing in my life. But it didn't, Grace said gently. We're here, together. That's what matters. I don't deserve you, Daniel said. Probably not, Grace teased, then turned serious. But I don't deserve you either. We're just two imperfect people trying to build something beautiful together. That's enough. The surgery day arrived. Mrs. Phelps, Chioma, and Emeka all came to the hospital for support. Even Daniel's father showed up, something he rarely did. Your wife is a remarkable woman, Mr. Phelps told his son as they waited. She reminds me of your mother, strong, selfless, devoted to family. I almost lost her, Papa, Daniel admitted, because I couldn't trust. Mr. Phelps put a hand on his shoulder. But you didn't lose her. You learned. That's what marriage is, son. Learning each other, trusting each other, choosing each other every day. The surgery took 6 hours. Dr. Ogunlade finally emerged, still in his scrubs, with a wide smile. Both surgeries were completely successful, he announced. Grace is in recovery and doing well. Tunde's new kidney is functioning perfectly. They're both going to be fine. The waiting room erupted in relieved celebration. Daniel felt his knees go weak. He sat down heavily, covering his face with his hands. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you, God. 2 days later, Grace was well enough to visit Tunde's room. She walked slowly, supported by a nurse, but her smile was radiant. How are you feeling? She asked her brother. Like I can breathe again, Tunde said, tears in his eyes. Sister, you saved my life. You would have done the same for me, Grace replied. Daniel stood in the doorway watching them. His phone buzzed with a text from Chioma. Still think you should have disguised yourself as a driver? He smiled and replied, Best decision I ever made. Led me to her. Another text came. And the worst decision? Daniel typed slowly. Not trusting her when it mattered, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for it. Over the next week, both Grace and Tunde recovered steadily. Tunde's color returned. His energy came back. He started talking about returning to school, about his future, about dreams he'd thought were dead. Grace healed more slowly, but she never complained. Instead, she focused on encouraging her brother and planning his recovery. One afternoon, Dr. Adeleke, the kidney specialist from the foundation, stopped by to check on Tunde. I heard you ended up not needing the foundation's help, he said cheerfully. My brother-in-law stepped in, Tunde explained. David looked at Daniel. You're the driver she was married to? Daniel laughed. It's a long story. I thought so, David grinned. Grace talked about you during our meetings. She was so worried about asking for your help. She really loves you, you know. I know, Daniel said, looking at his wife. I almost forgot that, but I won't forget again. After David left, Grace turned to Daniel. He thought you were suspicious. Everyone did. I was an idiot, Daniel said simply. Yes, Grace agreed, smiling, but you're my idiot. 3 weeks after the surgery, Tunde was discharged. Daniel had arranged for a fully equipped apartment near the hospital for Tunde's recovery. He hired a private nurse to stay with him. This is too much, Tunde protested weakly. Nothing is too much for family, Daniel replied. Besides, Grace needs to see you getting stronger. That's the best medicine for her recovery, too. That evening, back at their mansion, Daniel and Grace sat on the balcony overlooking the London skyline. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, "about that foundation Dr. David works with." "What about it?" "There are other families like yours, people who need help but are too proud to ask, or who don't have anyone to ask." Grace turned to him. "What are you suggesting?" "I want to start our own foundation," Daniel said. "The Grace Phelps Foundation for Medical Assistance. We'll help people like Tunde, people who need expensive treatments but can't afford them." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, you tried to help your brother alone because you were afraid of what I'd think," Daniel continued. "But you shouldn't have had to. No one should have to choose between their pride and their family's health. So let's help them. Together." Grace threw her arms around him. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it," Daniel replied. "You earned it, by being exactly who you are, kind, selfless, genuine." "Even when I lied about working night shifts?" Grace asked. "Even then," Daniel said. "Though maybe we should talk about your work." Grace pulled back. "What do you mean?" "I know you miss nursing," Daniel said. "I've seen how you light up at the hospital, how you talk to the nurses and doctors. You shouldn't have to give that up just because you married me." "But you said—" "I was wrong," Daniel interrupted. "I thought I was giving you freedom by saying you didn't have to work, but I was actually taking away something you love. So if you want to go back to nursing, I support you completely." Grace smiled. "Maybe part-time. I want to spend time with you too, and help with the foundation." "Perfect," Daniel agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights. "Daniel," Grace said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. When you were pretending to be a driver, did you ever imagine we'd end up here? Married, sitting on this balcony, planning a foundation together?" Daniel thought about it. "Honestly, no. I thought I was just testing you to see if you were genuine. I didn't realize I was actually falling in love with my best friend." "Best friend?" Grace raised an eyebrow. "That's what you became during those 8 months," Daniel explained. "Not just someone I was dating. You became the person I wanted to talk to about everything. The person who made me laugh. The person who challenged me to be better." "And then you proposed in the sand," Grace laughed. "With a cheap ring," Daniel added, laughing too. "I loved that ring," Grace said softly, "because it meant you loved me when you thought you had nothing to offer but yourself." "I had nothing to offer but myself," Daniel corrected. "The money, the cars, the houses, they're just things. You loved me, the real me." Grace took his hand. "And you loved the real me, even when you were angry at the hotel, even when you thought I'd betrayed you. Underneath it all, you were just hurt, because you loved me." "I did," Daniel admitted. "I do, more than I thought possible." "So where do we go from here?" Grace asked. Daniel pulled her close. "Forward, together, building trust every day. No more tests, no more disguises, just us, being real with each other." "I like that plan," Grace said, resting her head on his shoulder. As they watched the sunset over London, Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. The deception, the love, the misunderstanding, and finally, the truth. He had disguised himself as a driver to test his wife's heart, but in the end, it was his own heart that had been tested, and he had nearly failed. But Grace had given him a second chance. She had forgiven his suspicions and his lack of trust. She had shown him what real love looked like. Patient, forgiving, selfless. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" Grace asked. "For loving me enough to be honest," Daniel replied. "Even when honesty was hard, even when you were scared." "Always," Grace promised. "No more secrets, no more fear. Just us." "Just us," Daniel agreed. And for the first time since their wedding day, Daniel felt truly at peace with his marriage. Not because he had tested Grace and she had passed, but because they had tested each other and chosen love anyway. 6 months had passed since Tunde's successful transplant. The young man had returned to university, healthier and more determined than ever. The Grace Phelps Foundation had officially launched, helping 12 families in its first 3 months. But on this particular Tuesday morning, Daniel woke up to find his wife's side of the bed empty. Again. For the past 2 weeks, Grace had been distant. She left early in the mornings and came home late at night. When Daniel asked where she'd been, her answers were vague. Just foundation work, she'd say, or meeting with the hospital board. Daniel wanted to trust her. He had promised himself after the hotel incident that he would never doubt Grace again. But old habits die hard, and the voice in his head was getting louder. At his office that morning, Emeka noticed his friend's troubled expression. "You look like you didn't sleep," Emeka observed. "Grace was gone when I woke up," Daniel said, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. "That's the 5th time this week." "Did you ask her about it?" "She says it's foundation business," Daniel replied. "But something feels off. She's secretive again, taking calls in other rooms, smiling at her phone when she thinks I'm not looking." Emeka leaned back in his chair. "Daniel, don't do this." "Don't do what?" "Don't let your old paranoia destroy what you've built," Emeka warned. "You and Grace worked through everything. You promised to trust her." "I know," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "But what if I was wrong? What if she was just waiting for the right moment?" "The right moment for what?" Emeka asked incredulously. "Daniel, that woman gave her brother a kidney. She works at the foundation helping people. What more proof do you need?" Daniel knew Emeka was right, but the doubt had already planted itself in his mind, growing like a weed. That evening, Grace came home at 9 o'clock. Her hair was slightly messy, and she carried a large manila envelope. "Sorry I'm late," she said, kissing Daniel's cheek quickly. "Traffic was terrible." "Where were you?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Foundation meeting," Grace replied, heading toward the bedroom. "I need to shower. I'm exhausted." Daniel noticed she took the manila envelope with her. Why would she need to bring work documents into the bathroom? Over the next few days, Daniel's suspicions grew. Grace received a phone call and stepped onto the balcony, lowering her voice. She came home with paint stains on her clothes but wouldn't explain why. One evening, he saw her texting someone, and when he approached, she quickly locked her phone. "Who was that?" Daniel asked. "Just Chioma," Grace replied too quickly. But Daniel had seen his sister just hours earlier, and Chioma hadn't mentioned texting Grace. The breaking point came on Friday evening. Daniel came home early and heard Grace talking on the phone in their bedroom. "Yes, tomorrow," she was saying. "Everything needs to be perfect. He can't know until it's time." I know. I'm being careful." "Okay, I'll see you at 7. Make sure you bring everything we discussed." She hung up just as Daniel pushed open the door. Grace jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Daniel, you scared me." "Who were you talking to?" he asked, his voice cold. "A friend," Grace said, but her eyes wouldn't meet his. "What friend?" "Just someone from the foundation," she replied, moving past him toward the closet. "What are you doing home so early?" "Thought I'd surprise my wife," Daniel said, "but apparently she's been surprising me instead." Grace turned, sensing the tension. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you've been lying to me again," Daniel said, his voice rising. "Secret calls, coming home late, hiding things from me, just like before." "Daniel, it's not what you think." "That's exactly what you said last time," Daniel interrupted. "And I believed you. But here we are again." "This is completely different," Grace protested. "Is it?" Daniel challenged. "Then tell me, where are you going tomorrow at 7? What are you bringing? What can't I know about?" Grace's mouth opened and closed. "I can't tell you right now." "Of course you can't," Daniel said bitterly, "because you're hiding something again." "I'm not hiding anything bad," Grace said desperately. "Daniel, please, just trust me for one more day. Tomorrow, everything will make sense." "Trust you?" Daniel laughed without humor. "I trusted you before and it nearly destroyed me. I thought we were past secrets, Grace." Tears filled Grace's eyes. "We are. This isn't a secret. It's a surprise." "A surprise," Daniel repeated flatly. "You're meeting someone at 7 tomorrow with something I can't know about. That's not a surprise. That's a secret." "Daniel, Please, I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight, Daniel said, turning to leave. Daniel, wait! But he was already gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Grace sank onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. She pulled out her phone and called Chioma. He knows something's going on, Grace said when Chioma answered. He's suspicious again. Did you tell him? Chioma asked. I can't, not yet. Everything's set for tomorrow. If I tell him now, it'll ruin everything. Grace, maybe you should just explain. No, Grace said firmly. After tomorrow, he'll understand. He'll see that not every secret is a betrayal. Some secrets are just love. That night, Daniel lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. I love you. Please trust me just one more day. I promise everything will make sense tomorrow. Daniel stared at the message for a long time before turning off his phone without responding. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He heard Grace moving around the house, getting ready to leave. He checked his watch. 6:30. Something inside him snapped. He couldn't do this anymore. He needed to know the truth. Daniel dressed quickly in simple clothes and a cap. If Grace was meeting someone, he would follow her. He would see for himself what she was hiding. At exactly 7, Grace left the house carrying a large bag. Daniel followed in his car, staying several vehicles behind. Grace drove to a part of Surulere he recognized. It was near the orphanage where they had first met. She parked outside a large building that looked newly renovated. Daniel parked down the street and watched. Several people arrived after Grace. He recognized some of them. Chioma, his mother, Emeka, Tunde, even Dr. David Adeleke. What was going on? Daniel got out of his car and walked closer. The building's gate was open. He could hear voices inside, music, laughter. He stepped through the gate and stopped dead in his tracks. The compound had been completely transformed. Colorful decorations hung everywhere. Tables were set up with food. A large banner stretched across the main building. Daniel's Hope Center, opening ceremony. Children from the orphanage next door were running around, playing. Grace stood in the center, directing people, laughing, looking more alive than he'd seen her in weeks. You came early, a voice said behind him. Daniel turned to find Tunde standing there, grinning. What is this? Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Come see, Tunde said, leading him toward the building. Inside, the space had been converted into a beautiful community center. There was a medical clinic on one side, a library on the other, and a large common area in the middle. Photos covered the walls, photos of Daniel as a child, his parents, his journey from humble beginnings to billionaire success. But the photos weren't about celebrating wealth. They were about celebrating character, hard work, and giving back. Grace appeared beside him, her eyes nervous but hopeful. Surprise, she said softly. Daniel couldn't speak. He just stared at everything around him. You told me once about growing up in Surulere, Grace began. About how your mother used to bring you to this very street. How you played with the kids from the orphanage. How you promised yourself that one day, if you made it, you'd come back and help. Daniel nodded slowly, remembering. I found this building 3 months ago, Grace continued. It was abandoned, falling apart. But it was right next to the orphanage where we met, where our story began. And I thought, what if we brought your dream to life? She took his hand and led him through the center. The medical clinic will provide free health care to the community, she explained. Dr. David has volunteered to oversee it. The library has books for the children and computer classes for adults. The common area will host after-school programs, job training, and community events. Daniel stopped in front of a wall. It had a large painting of him and Grace, done in bright, beautiful colors. Underneath, a plaque read, Built with love by Grace Phelps, for the man who taught her that true wealth is measured in the lives you touch. All those late nights, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. All those secret calls. I was working on this, Grace said, with Chioma, your mother, Emeka, everyone. We wanted it to be perfect. We wanted it to be ready for today. "What's today?" Daniel asked, though tears were already forming in his eyes. "Your birthday," Grace said softly. "The birthday you never celebrate because you say it's just another day. But it's not just another day, Daniel. It's the day the world got you, the day my life got you, and I wanted to show you what that means." Daniel turned to face her fully. "I thought you were hiding something terrible. I thought—" "I know what you thought," Grace interrupted gently, "and I don't blame you. I knew you'd be suspicious, but I also knew that this needed to be a surprise, because you would have tried to stop me. You would have insisted on paying for everything yourself. How did you pay for all this?" Daniel asked, looking around the massive center. Grace smiled. "The foundation helped. Your mother donated. Chioma used her savings. Even Tunde contributed from his part-time job. All the people whose lives you've touched wanted to give back. This center isn't just from me, Daniel. It's from everyone who loves you." Chioma appeared with the rest of the family. "Surprise, big brother." Mrs. Phelps hugged her son. "Happy birthday, my son. Your wife is something special." Daniel pulled Grace into his arms, burying his face in her shoulder. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I doubted you again." "I forgive you," Grace whispered. "But Daniel, we need to talk about this, about your trust issues, because I can't keep proving myself over and over." "I know," Daniel said, pulling back to look at her. "You're right. It's not fair to you." Emeka stepped forward. "Daniel, man, we need to talk about therapy." Daniel looked at his friend, surprised. "I'm serious," the Emeka continued. "Your father's betrayal by business partners, your ex-girlfriends using you, all of that left scars. You need to work through it with a professional, because Grace shouldn't have to pay for other people's mistakes." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll do it. I'll get help." Grace squeezed his hand. "We'll do it together, couples therapy, because this isn't just your issue. This is our issue, and we'll work through it as a team." The opening ceremony began. The orphanage children came pouring in, amazed by the new space. Community members from the neighborhood explored the facilities. Doctors and volunteers explained the free services that would be available. Daniel stood with Grace, watching it all, his heart full. "You know what the crazy thing is?" he said quietly. "What?" "I disguised myself as a driver to test if you were genuine," Daniel said. "And now twice, you've had to prove yourself to me because I couldn't let go of my fear. But you never tested me. You just loved me." Grace leaned against him. "I tested you once." "When?" "That first day we met, at the orphanage," Grace said. "You were dressed simply, but I saw how you looked at the children, how you treated the orphanage workers with respect, how you talked about honest work like it was noble. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." "One conversation told you that much?" "One conversation showed me your heart," Grace corrected. "Everything else was just getting to know the details." An elderly woman from the neighborhood approached them, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said to Grace. "My grandchildren come to this street every day. Now they'll have somewhere safe to learn, to play, to grow. God bless you." Grace hugged her warmly. "It's our pleasure, Mama." As the woman walked away, Daniel turned to Grace. "You did all this in 3 months?" "With a lot of help," Grace admitted. "Your mother is surprisingly good at organizing construction workers, and Chioma has connections everywhere. She got us discounts on everything from paint to computers. And the painting?" Daniel gestured to the beautiful artwork of them together. Grace smiled. "Remember when I came home with paint stains? I was working with a local artist. She's from the neighborhood. Her talent is incredible, but she's never had formal training. We're sponsoring her to go to art school." Daniel shook his head in wonder. "While I was suspecting you of betrayal, you were building a legacy." "Our legacy," Grace corrected. "This is for both of us. For the children we'll have someday. For the community that shaped you. For everyone who needs hope." Tunde appeared with a small boy from the orphanage. "Uncle Daniel," Tunde said formally. "This is Emmanuel. He wants to say something." The little boy, who couldn't have been more than 6, looked up at Daniel with big eyes. "Thank you for the library," Emmanuel said shyly. "My teacher says I'm good at reading. Now I can read every day." Daniel knelt down to the boy's level. "What's your favorite book?" "I don't know yet," Emmanuel admitted, but I want to read them all. Daniel smiled. Then you will, and when you do, you come tell me about them. Deal? Emmanuel nodded enthusiastically and ran back to the library. As Daniel stood up, he felt something shift inside him. This center, these children, this community, this was what wealth was for. Not for testing people or protecting himself from betrayal, but for building something meaningful. The celebration continued into the evening. There was music, dancing, food, and laughter. At one point, the orphanage children performed a song they had learned, thanking Daniel and Grace for the center. When the last guests had left, Daniel and Grace stood alone in the now quiet center. I have one more surprise, Grace said, leading him to a small office in the back. Inside there was a desk, bookshelves, and a comfortable chair. On the wall was a simple sign, Daniel Phelps, Founder's Office. What's this for? Daniel asked. For you, Grace said. I know you work from your company office every day, but I thought maybe once a week you could work from here. Be present in the community. Meet the people the foundation helps. Remember why you do what you do. Daniel sat down in the chair, running his hands over the desk. You've thought of everything. I tried, Grace said, perching on the edge of the desk. Daniel, I need you to understand something. When I was planning all this, I wasn't trying to keep secrets from you. I was trying to give you something pure, something that wasn't tainted by doubt or suspicion. I wanted you to see that not everything hidden is bad. Sometimes we hide things because we're wrapping them with love. Daniel pulled her down onto his lap. I understand now, and I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to prove yourself again. We both have work to do, Grace said. Me on being more open, even when I want to surprise you. You on trusting that not everyone is out to hurt you. Couples therapy, Daniel said, starting next week. Starting next week, Grace agreed. But for tonight, can we just enjoy this? Your birthday, our center, our future. Daniel kissed her softly. Yes, let's enjoy this. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking out the window at the neighborhood. Grace, Daniel said eventually, do you remember what you told me at the hospital, after the whole kidney transplant ordeal? I said a lot of things. Which part? You said trust isn't something you prove once and then it's done. It's something you build every day. Grace nodded. I remember. I'm ready to really build it now, Daniel said. Not with tests or suspicions or disguises, but with honesty, vulnerability, and faith. Real faith that you are who you've shown me you are. And who is that? Grace asked softly. The love of my life, Daniel replied. My partner, my best friend. The woman who sees past my wealth to my heart. The woman who builds hope centers instead of harboring resentment. The woman who gives kidneys and second chances and birthday surprises that change everything. Grace wiped a tear from her cheek. You're going to make me cry again. Good tears this time? The best tears, she confirmed. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. Son, we're at your house for the birthday dinner Grace planned. Where are you two? Daniel showed Grace the message. Another surprise? She grinned. I told you, I thought of everything. They locked up the center and drove home together. The mansion was filled with family and close friends, all gathered for an intimate birthday dinner. As they ate and laughed and shared stories, Daniel looked around the table. His parents, Chioma, Emeka, Tunde, Dr. David, and several other people who had become important in their lives. But his eyes kept returning to Grace, his wife, the woman he had tested, doubted, suspected, and hurt. The woman who had forgiven him every time and loved him anyway. After dinner, when everyone had moved to the living room for cake, Daniel pulled Grace aside onto the balcony. I want to tell you something, he said. Okay. When I dressed up as a driver all those years ago, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was protecting myself from gold diggers and users. But really, I was protecting myself from love. Because love requires vulnerability. It requires trust. It requires believing in someone even when you're scared. Grace listened quietly. "You've shown me what real love looks like," Daniel continued. "Not perfect love. We've both made mistakes, but honest love. The kind that builds hope centers and forgives suspicions and chooses each other even when it's hard." "Daniel, let me finish," he said gently. "I want to renew our vows." Grace's eyes widened. "What?" "I want to marry you again," Daniel said. "But this time, no secrets, no disguises, no tests. Just two people who know exactly who the other is, choosing to build a life together. What do you say?" Grace threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They kissed as the London skyline glittered behind them, the sounds of their family's laughter drifting from inside. "I love you," Daniel whispered. "I love you too," Grace replied. "And Daniel?" "Yes?" "Thank you for disguising yourself as a driver." Daniel pulled back, confused. "Why? It caused so much pain." Grace smiled. "Because it led you to me. Because it showed you that real love exists. Because without that test, you might never have believed you deserved someone who could love you for you. So even though it was wrong, even though it hurt, I'm grateful for it. Because it brought us here." Daniel thought about that. She was right. His disguise had been born from fear, but it had led him to the most genuine love he'd ever known. "You're too wise for me," he said. "No," Grace corrected. "I'm just wise enough for us." They returned to the party, where Tunde was telling everyone about his upcoming graduation. With his health restored, he had returned to university with renewed determination. He was graduating top of his class. "Uncle Daniel," Tunde said, "I want to work at the Hope Center. After graduation, I want to use my computer science degree to create programs for the kids, teach them coding, help them see that technology can change their lives." "The job is yours," Daniel said immediately, "but you'll be paid a proper salary, no family discount." Everyone laughed. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Chioma pulled Daniel aside. "You look happy," she observed. "I am," Daniel replied. "Really happy. For the first time in a long time." "Grace is good for you," Chioma said. "She keeps you humble. She reminds you where you came from." "She does," Daniel agreed. "And more than that, she shows me where I'm going, who I can become." Chioma hugged her brother. "I'm proud of you, for getting help, for working on your trust issues, for being man enough to admit when you're wrong." "Grace makes it easy," Daniel said. "She doesn't hold grudges. She just loves and moves forward." "Keep her close," Chioma advised. "Women like that are rare." "I will," Daniel promised. "I'm never letting her go again." After everyone had left, Daniel and Grace cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronicity. "Tired?" Daniel asked as they finished. "Exhausted," Grace admitted, "but happy. Today was perfect." They headed to bed, but before turning off the light, Grace said, "Daniel, there's one more thing I need to tell you." Daniel's heart skipped. "What is it?" Grace took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I'm pregnant." Time seemed to stop. Daniel stared at his wife, his hand on her belly, his mind trying to process what she'd just said. "You're... we're... we're having a baby," Grace confirmed, tears and laughter mixing in her voice. "I found out last week. I wanted to tell you today, with everything else. Our Hope Center, our renewed commitment, and now our future." Daniel pulled her close, overwhelmed with emotion. "A baby. We're having a baby." "Are you happy?" Grace asked. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Daniel said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Grace, you've given me everything. Love, purpose, hope, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "You disguised yourself as a driver," Grace teased. "Remember?" They both laughed. As they lay in bed, Grace curled against Daniel's side, his hand still resting on her stomach. Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. He had started with fear and suspicion, testing the woman who would become his wife. He had nearly lost her twice because he couldn't let go of his doubts. But through it all, Grace had remained constant, patient, forgiving, loving. She had taught him that trust isn't about testing people until they prove themselves worthy. It's about choosing to believe in someone even when you're scared, even when you've been hurt before, even when it would be easier to walk away. Grace, he whispered in the darkness. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on us, she replied sleepily. As Daniel drifted off to sleep, he made a silent promise to his unborn child, to his wife, and to himself. No more disguises, no more tests, no more letting fear control his life. From now on, he would choose love. He would choose trust. He would choose grace every single day for the rest of his life. And as the London night settled over their home, Daniel Phelps, billionaire, husband, soon-to-be father, and finally, a man at peace, smiled in the darkness. His journey as a disguised driver had broken his heart when he thought he'd discovered betrayal. But in the end, it had revealed the greatest truth of all. Real love doesn't need to be tested. It just needs to be trusted. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from Daniel and Grace's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.